The world once measured power in things you could hold, count, and physically protect, and for centuries paper money carried weight not just in value, but in visible presence, while coins echoed through history as enduring symbols of trust, empire, and permanence, and gold rested in vaults as the ultimate form of unquestioned and absolute financial power. But slowly, that certainty began to erode without most people even being aware of it. As crisis after crisis weakened faith in physical representations of stored wealth, and inflation quietly reduced currencies into something far more fragile and symbolic, so what once felt permanent began to feel unstable, temporary, and deeply uncertain, while in the background values started detaching from physical form entirely and silently. And cash still circulated, but its dominance was already quietly fading into irrelevance. As people began trusting numbers on digital screens more than bills in their hands, and transactions accelerated far beyond the limits of traditional physical exchange systems, making speed more valuable than substance in the structure of modern economies, so paper money began disappearing, not with force but through growing irrelevance, while coins slowly became relics of memory rather than tools of real economic power. And gold transformed from currency into reserve and then into complete abstraction, meaning wealth was no longer something you could physically store or truly protect, but instead existed inside invisible systems, constantly moving and recalculating as the idea of ownership itself shifted toward digital representation and access. And even central banks reduced reliance on physical reserves over long periods of time, while security moved from physical protection to encryption and controlled access systems, and trust shifted from visible institutions to invisible networks of complex code. So the burning of cash became symbolic not of collapse but of a deeper transition, as ash replaced paper, while code replaced both value and mechanisms of control, and gold dissolved into particles, reappearing as digital representations of wealth. While a new system formed without needing any physical foundation to sustain itself, yet very few realized how complete and irreversible this transformation would become, because the disappearance of tangible wealth was gradual, silent, and highly efficient, and convenience disguised a deeper structural shift in the foundations of global finance, while physical money became slower, riskier, and far less efficient than digital flows. So governments adapted slowly, while financial markets evolved much faster in response, creating a widening gap between perception and the actual financial reality underneath, as most people still believed wealth required some form of physical anchor to exist, while systems were already operating far beyond that outdated limitation entirely, and value became abstract, detached from any single physical form or material backing. While banks reduced cash dependency as digital systems proved consistently superior, and storage shifted from physical vaults into distributed servers across secure facilities, while transactions became nearly instantaneous, reducing friction across entire economies, and even savings transformed into digital entries rather than physically stored assets, making physical wealth more symbolic than operational within real financial systems. As economic power shifted toward those managing the digital infrastructure itself, while the transition remained quiet without any defining moment or public declaration, yet it reshaped every financial interaction taking place in modern global society, as cash faded, not because it failed, but because it simply became unnecessary and gold lost its central role, as systems evolved far beyond scarcity-based models. While the definition of money itself began to change at a fundamental level, and ownership became a matter of controlled access rather than direct possession. As systems replaced physical objects as the true carriers of economic value, and financial control moved into layers of invisible technological architecture, while transactions became data points within larger patterns of economic behavior. And those patterns themselves became more valuable than the transactions behind them, as human behavior started being analyzed, predicted, and increasingly monetized, while physical exchange became optional rather than required for participation, and entire economies adapted to function without tangible currency at all, as digital balances replaced physical accumulation as the measure of wealth, and access replaced ownership as the key to participating in financial systems, while trust became dependent on systems rather than traditional institutions, and those systems operated continuously without pause, interruption, or limitation, as money evolved into pure information moving seamlessly across global networks, while control concentrated around those who built and maintained those systems. and the physical representation of wealth continued losing relevance over time as fewer and fewer transactions required any tangible medium of exchange, while digital ecosystems expanded beyond traditional financial boundaries and integrated into everyday life without resistance or full awareness, as people traded convenience for invisibility without clearly realizing it, while systems became faster, more efficient, and increasingly dominant, and the need for physical interaction in finance continued declining steadily as cash became an inconvenience rather than a practical necessity, while digital systems absorbed every layer of global economic activity and financial power, became more centralized through infrastructure control as individuals participated without understanding the systems beneath them, while the illusion of control remained visible through simple user interfaces, and real control existed deeper within hidden technological architecture, as wealth became numbers detached from any physical guarantee or backing. While those numbers could move instantly across interconnected global networks, and the idea of location lost meaning in modern financial transactions as borders became less relevant within highly integrated digital economies, while physical limitations disappeared in the movement of capital entirely, and the concept of money evolved far beyond traditional definitions of value as systems replaced objects as the foundation of economic reality worldwide, while the transition continued without public resistance or awareness, and by the time it became visible, it was already completely irreversible as the world had moved beyond physical wealth as its primary foundation, while most people were still thinking in terms of cash and gold. And the entire financial system had already shifted permanently into one defined not by what you can physically hold in your hands, but by what you can access within vast and invisible digital networks. As physical wealth faded, an invisible architecture began expanding across the world, and behind every transaction, complex systems started replacing traditional financial structures, while massive data centers emerged as the new vaults protecting global economic activity, and rows of servers processed transactions continuously without pause or interruption as cool blue lights reflected a system designed for precision, efficiency, and control. While gold no longer sat in vaults but existed as structured data within digital systems, and every transaction passed through multiple layers of verification and computation as speed, accuracy, and scalability defined this new financial backbone entirely, while banks transformed from physical institutions into complex digital infrastructures, and access to wealth became dependent on connectivity and system authorization. As biometric systems replaced signatures as proof of identity and ownership verification, while a fingerprint or scan could unlock entire financial ecosystems instantly, and currency symbols appeared digitally rather than existing as physical objects, as payments occurred without friction, delay, or tangible exchange between parties, while the concept of a wallet evolved into secure digital environments and platforms. And security relied on encryption rather than physical barriers or human protection, as financial systems merged with global communication and data infrastructures, while every movement of capital became trackable, analyzable, and predictable, and artificial intelligence began identifying patterns within economic behavior as markets reacted faster than human perception could realistically follow events. While the infrastructure became deeply interconnected across continents and regions, and failure in one system could ripple globally within seconds or minutes as control shifted from physical locations to distributed digital networks, while access became the most valuable form of economic power and influence, and those who controlled infrastructure controlled the movement of global value as physical banks became interfaces rather than true centers of authority, while money evolved into pure information, fluid and constantly adaptable, and transactions created data patterns that gained independent value over time, as these patterns became tools for prediction, control, and strategic advantage, while the system no longer just processed money but analyzed human behavior, and every interaction contributed to a larger network of financial intelligence. As the infrastructure expanded beyond traditional boundaries of banking and finance, while digital systems integrated with commerce, governance, and personal identity, and economic activity became inseparable from technological systems and networks, as financial flows operated continuously without pause or geographic limitation, while regulation struggled to keep pace with rapid technological evolution. and the complexity of the system increased beyond full human understanding as automation replaced many traditional roles within financial institutions. While global systems operated in real time across all regions simultaneously, and information itself became as valuable as currency. Within this ecosystem, as financial decisions became increasingly data-driven and algorithmically guided while the system adapted faster than institutions could respond or regulate, and trust shifted toward algorithms rather than human judgment or authority, as digital infrastructure became the foundation of modern economic systems, while physical interaction became optional in nearly all financial transactions, and the system became essential while remaining largely invisible to its users as dependency increased gradually while alternatives quietly disappeared, while control concentrated around those managing system architecture and networks, and the flow of capital became dependent on technological reliability as outages and disruptions revealed the fragility of digital dependence. While redundancy systems were built to prevent large-scale failures in global finance, became resilient yet increasingly complex to manage as cybersecurity emerged as a critical component of financial stability, while threats evolved alongside the systems designed to prevent them, and protection required constant adaptation to new forms of digital risk as financial networks expanded deeper into everyday life and behavior, while payments became integrated into devices, platforms, and services, and the boundary between finance and technology disappeared almost entirely as economic participation required access to digital systems and infrastructure, while exclusion from these systems meant exclusion from financial activity, and access itself became a form of power within modern economies, as data ownership became as important as monetary ownership itself, while those controlling data gained influence over financial outcomes, and predictive systems began shaping behavior before decisions were made, as markets started responding not just to events but to expectations, while algorithms influenced pricing, investment, and economic direction, and financial systems became proactive rather than reactive in nature, as intelligence replaced reaction as the core driver of economic systems, while visibility decreased as complexity increased behind the interfaces and users interacted with simplified layers hiding deeper operations, as trust was maintained through experience rather than understanding, while systems became more efficient but less transparent over time, and control mechanisms became embedded within technological frameworks as the infrastructure defined what was possible within financial systems, while innovation accelerated without fully visible consequences, and economic systems became dependent on continuous technological evolution as the pace of change exceeded the ability to fully comprehend it, while global finance transformed into a network of constant computation, and decision-making occurred at speeds beyond human capability as systems learned, adapted, and optimized without direct oversight, while human involvement shifted towards supervision rather than control, and the infrastructure continued expanding beyond traditional limits as new technologies integrated into existing financial frameworks, while complexity increased as systems layered upon one another and stability depended on maintaining balance within these networks, as disruptions could cascade through interconnected global systems, while resilience required constant monitoring and adjustment, and the digital backbone of finance became the true source of power as control no longer required visibility or direct authority, while influence operated silently through infrastructure and systems, and the world became dependent on networks few could fully understand as financial power moved into invisible layers of digital architecture, while the system continued evolving beyond its original design, and the infrastructure became the foundation of modern civilization itself. As digital infrastructure matured, control gradually shifted toward those who managed global networks, and decisions affecting millions of people were increasingly made far from public visibility, while physical boardrooms transformed into coordination hubs, driven by real-time data systems, and leaders began observing entire economies through digital models rather than direct experience, as cities appeared as interconnected nodes within vast global financial mapping systems, while data streams replaced traditional trade routes as indicators of economic activity and power, and the world began functioning less as separate nations and more as a single integrated network, as financial influence moved faster than any political system could realistically respond or regulate. While global markets operated continuously without geographic limitation or traditional closure, and capital flowed across borders without friction, delay, or physical constraint of any kind as national currencies became integrated into larger, interconnected digital financial frameworks. While central banks adapted their roles to maintain relevance within evolving global systems and digital currencies, emerged as extensions of existing financial control structures. As the distinction between public governance and private financial systems became increasingly blurred while infrastructure itself began to dictate influence more than territory or population size, and fiber optic networks became the true arteries of global economic circulation and exchange as information traveled faster than any physical asset or commodity in recorded history. While control over data became equivalent to control over economic outcomes and decisions, and power concentrated around access points within technological and financial infrastructure as entire economies became dependent on systems they did not fully understand or control, while digital trust replaced institutional trust as the foundation of modern exchange systems, and the globe became wrapped in layers of invisible connectivity spanning continents. As financial transactions formed real-time patterns across multiple regions simultaneously, while value moved silently through networks without physical form or geographic limitation, and the system evolved into something increasingly autonomous and self-regulating as human oversight struggled to match the complexity and speed of global operations, while dependency on digital infrastructure became absolute across all major economies, and every nation became integrated into a shared financial and technological environment as competition shifted away from resources toward infrastructure and system dominance, while the balance of power increasingly favored those who controlled digital architecture, and the transition occurred gradually without a single defining moment or declaration, as physical wealth became secondary to digital representation and system access, while economic power became abstract yet far more concentrated than before, and control required access, intelligence, and deep integration into systems as financial influence extended beyond traditional political or geographic boundaries. While markets began responding more to data flows than physical supply, chains and power moved silently through networks rather than visible institutions. As global coordination replaced isolated national strategies in economic planning, while financial systems prioritized efficiency, speed, and continuous optimization, and physical money became almost irrelevant in large-scale global operations as trust shifted fully into algorithms, protocols, and encrypted systems, while economic activity became inseparable from digital infrastructure worldwide, and transactions became instantaneous expressions of computational processes as systems began predicting behavior rather than merely recording it, while financial intelligence became a central driver of global decision-making, and markets evolved into reactive and predictive hybrid systems. Simultaneously, as visibility decreased while systemic complexity increased exponentially, while users interacted with simplified interfaces masking deep infrastructure, and real control existed within hidden layers of technological systems as dependency deepened without most users fully recognizing the shift. While access to systems determined participation in modern economies, and exclusion from infrastructure meant exclusion from financial life entirely, as data became as valuable as money within global economic frameworks, while those controlling data gained structural influence over markets, and predictive analytics began shaping outcomes before decisions occurred, as financial systems became proactive rather than reactive in operation, while algorithms influenced pricing, investment, and resource allocation, and intelligence systems continuously optimized global economic behavior as human oversight shifted toward monitoring rather than direct control, while systems evolved faster than regulatory or institutional adaptation, and financial architecture expanded into everyday life and behavior as payments became embedded into devices, platforms, and identities, while the boundary between economy and technology disappeared completely, and economic participation required integration into digital ecosystems as infrastructure determined opportunity more than geography or policy, while technological access became the new form of economic inequality, and systems grew increasingly interdependent across all global sectors as resilience depended on redundancy, synchronization, and real-time monitoring, while disruptions in one region could propagate globally within seconds, and financial stability became a function of system architecture integrity as cybersecurity emerged as a core pillar of global economic security, while threats evolved in parallel with the systems designed to prevent them. And constant adaptation became necessary for systemic survival as networks expanded beyond finance into governance and identity systems, while control mechanisms became embedded within digital frameworks and influence operated invisibly through infrastructure rather than authority, as the physical world became increasingly governed by digital logic, while decisions were executed faster than human interpretation allowed. And global systems began operating with partial autonomy and self-adjustment as humans moved from operators to observers within financial systems. While the infrastructure became the primary engine of economic reality and the world transitioned into a state defined by continuous digital flow, as every layer of society became dependent on invisible systems, while the concept of separation between physical and digital dissolved, and power ultimately concentrated in the architecture of global networks, as the transition completed without announcement but with total effect, while the modern world became fully defined by digital infrastructure and the system now runs not on physical wealth but on connected intelligence.